I'm going to call this March 3rd Planning Commission meeting to order. Thank you for joining us tonight. We have two items to consider. One was deferred, so we will not be considering it tonight, and that will be MP-22-01, Bridge Road Holdings, LLC. Before we consider the items before us tonight, like the board to consider the minutes from the last meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the minutes of February the 3rd or February 2022.
Second.
Motion has been made and properly seconded. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion carries. The first item on the agenda is Z-22-01/V-22-03, Wexler, 182 Marietta Street. And before Michael comes forward, the items forwarded to the council will be considered on March the 28th. Michael.
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. The first item before you this evening is a rezoning invariance that would allow for the construction of one for-sale single-family detached home on 0.71 acres in the downtown overlay. Rezoning is requested from C2 General Commercial to Downtown Residential DTR, and a variance is requested to reduce buffers on the property. The overhead is showing the location map, which looks a little strange on mine, but the property is located at 182 Marietta Street. That's the south side of Marietta Street, just west of Margene Way. This is the street view of the property. It's the Sutton's Appliance Repair. This property was developed with a single-family detached home that's been converted to a commercial use contractor's office. Surrounding properties, or actually just one other street view. So this is looking at the rear of the property from Old Milton Parkway. So there's a buffer on an adjacent property, which is the Alpharetta Beach House property. So this is a view from Old Milton looking at the rear of the property. This is our zoning map of the property. So surrounding uses are commercial OP, office professional to the west, C2 general commercial to the south and east. And then the north side of Marietta Street has residential zoning. As I mentioned, the applicant is requesting a variance to reduce the 50-foot undisturbed buffer. So currently, the properties are zoned commercial, so there would be no buffer requirement between commercial to commercial. The applicant is actually asking to rezone the property to allow for a residential use. So the responsibility, while typically buffers are provided on the commercial property, the responsibility then becomes the applicant's with the request to rezone it to residential. So they are asking for a reduction of the buffers on the property. As I mentioned, there's an existing buffer on the property to the south. That buffer ranges in size from about 25 feet to 60 feet. There is existing pretty substantial amount of trees on the property to the west. However, that property could redevelop in the future. And there's a small amount of tree coverage along the common property line with the property to the east. This is the applicant's site layout showing the home, new home on the property. The applicants indicated this would be the home would be 3 stories, about approximately 5,000 square feet. There's a driveway with porte-cochere on the east side of the home, which would lead back to a garage at the rear of the home. The site layout indicates a 40-foot front setback and minimum 15-foot side setbacks. The garage has an 8-foot side setback on the side and a little over 20 feet. DTR actually allows 10-foot front, side, and rear setbacks. Side setbacks actually 0, but it requires 10 feet between structures. The applicant provided an arborist assessment of the property. There are 5 specimen-size oaks that were identified in the front yard. However, all 5 were identified in poor condition, and our city arborist agrees with that finding and has indicated that they're not, shouldn't be considered for preservation. The arborist report does indicate that there are some other good condition trees on the property, and the applicant has indicated that they intend to save a stand of trees along the west side and rear of the property. The applicant provided some inspiration photos, and actually, I believe yesterday or the day before, provided an elevation of the home. So these are just some inspiration photos of the home. Did send these over to the downtown consultant, who indicated that he believed the style would comply with one of the downtown overlay architectural styles that are approved. Appeared to him in a neoclassical or Beaux-Arts style. And this is the elevation that the applicant has provided. Staff looked at the applicant's proposal in consideration of the review criteria for a rezoning invariance. We believe that the zoning proposal is consistent with the vision of the downtown master plan. Although this area is designated mixed use in the downtown, we allow for single use of property, both residential or commercial, or a mixed use development. So you're not required to do mix of uses on a single property. As it relates to the 50-foot undisturbed buffer requirement, we believe that that requirement would discourage residential development along Marietta Street, which already has that residential feel and presence. If approved, conditions are recommended absolving the properties to the east and west from future buffer requirements should they redevelop with commercial and mixed-use development. The applicant had indicated that they received positive, for the most part, had received positive feedback. They provided 2 letters of support. The city also received a letter of support from the property owner to the south, the Alpharetta Beach Houses. Did hear from the property to the west. And that property owner indicated that they just had some concerns that the residential zoning could potentially impact their ability to redevelop in the future. And I think that relates back to the whole buffer issue. And again, we're recommending a condition that we believe resolves that. We did show this item to the public at the February 9th Community Zoning Information Meeting. There were no public comments. And with that, we are recommending approval of the applicant's request subject to 10 conditions, and I'll go through those. Condition 1, approximately 0.71 acres shall be zoned DTR and limited to 1 single-family detached home. Site shall be developed substantially similar to the submitted site layout labeled Exhibit A, except for modifications required to comply with the conditions below and subject to meeting all city code requirements and conditions of zoning. Condition 2, relates it to the home elevation that was submitted, and then subject to final approval by downtown consultant and DRB. Condition 3, home and garage shall maintain a minimum 20-foot front setback, 10-foot side setback, and 10-foot rear setback. We wanted to provide a little bit of flexibility with the site layout, considering that DTR allows the lesser building setbacks, and it'll allow the applicant to position the home to have the least impact to trees and to provide, as I will mention in a further condition, what we're recommending as 10-foot planted buffers. Condition 4, landscape strip along Marietta Street shall be planted with shade trees as a continuation of what has been planted and designed in the downtown and outside of utility easements and overhead utilities as approved by staff. Condition 5, a decorative low wall, metal fencing, or hedge with columns shall frame the front yard. Condition 6, A 10-foot planted buffer shall be provided along the east, south, and west property lines and planted with a mix of evergreen trees and shrubs. Existing trees within the 10-foot buffers identified to be in good condition shall be saved with final approval by staff. Condition 7, property owner shall improve Marietta Street frontage with a 6-foot planter planted with street trees, 6-foot sidewalk, and decorative pedestrian lighting as approved by staff. Condition 8, property owner acknowledges that redevelopment of the properties to the east and west with a commercial or mixed-use development shall not require a buffer adjacent to the subject property. Condition 9, home, accessory structures, and infiltration shall be positioned on the property to have the least impact to existing trees along the west and south property lines as approved by staff. In condition 10, fences and walls visible from the public right-of-way shall be decorative as approved by staff. Unfinished wood fences and decks shall not be visible from the street. And that concludes the presentation. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Thank you, Mike. Could you please put the zoning map on the screen one more time? So except for the north, which is across Marietta Street, you have office professional to the west and C2 on the east and south.
Correct.
And staff didn't have any concerns regarding a single-family residential in the middle of OP and C2.
We don't, because the street was originally developed as a residential street. These are former homes that have converted to commercial uses. We have not seen, and we do think that under the MU, future land use category, which covers all these properties here, there is potential that you would have single-use residential, single-use commercial, or a mix of uses on a property.
Okay, any further questions for Michael?
Yeah, I'm going to tie off that for a second, because I think you're absolutely right. Looking at this is our land use is pulling in the MU, so it creates a mixed use. So within the mixed use, you have the ability to do residential on this, actually pretty much up and down the whole street, and that's comprehensive land plan is what we were looking at. So the idea here is you're taking the MU, you don't really have the space to do office and other components that you would normally see unless you had kind of a grouping of the properties together. Then you could kind of really do a mixed use. Mm-hmm. But a smaller piece of property like this, you're taking the residential, but you can't really build the other components of the MU. So you're getting one part of it and you don't have space to do the other. Yeah. That's why we're tying the residential. So I think what staff is kind of thinking about is the reason why it doesn't have a significant change. I think it's got that piece to it.
Yeah, and the market is dictating what will eventually occur here with redevelopment. I mean, Thompson Street is a great example. Thompson Street has a future land use of mixed use live-work. The downtown live-work is the appropriate zoning district for that street. What we've seen on Thompson Street is while standalone office is permitted there, most of that has developed as residential. So you could have standalone office, you could have residential and office together, or you could have residential uses on their own.
If you don't mind,
sorry.
one more question, if you don't mind. I was going to go back to, since I'm going to live across the street from these neighbors, these applicants, what the streetscape, go through number 7 for me, where we're talking about 6-foot planters planted with street lights, all that. There was concern of, is this to match up with what you see across the street, where I think it's all brick from Victoria Station all the way down, there's lights? Is it the idea of the city that that would match up and be similar to the other side of the street?
This 7 is purely related to the type of street that Marietta falls under in the downtown overlay. And so those are the streetscape improvements that would be required.
So a 6-foot sidewalk
Yes.
on that side
Yes.
with lights that would match the other side of the street?
Yes.
Is that what that's what the intent is there? I just wanted to clarify that a little bit.
Yes.
And when I saw the planter planted, I don't know what a 6-foot planter,
That's what I don't understand.
So you would have the travel lanes of the road, and then you would have a grass planter strip or a strip of land before you got to the sidewalk. That strip of land would have street trees within it. Then you would have the sidewalk. Then you would have the private property line, their front property line.
So taking that, so
It's not a plant, is that what you call it, a planter?
It's called a plant. It's called a planter in the downtown code.
Vision is a planter is like a big.
a raised,
raised
yeah,
concrete
a
thing
raised,
that you see
movable,
around the
mobile.
city.
It's a pervious strip of land. It's a pervious strip of land adjacent to the travel lanes of the road,
Okay.
providing separation between the sidewalk and the pedestrian sidewalk and the roadway.
So across the street, there's probably 18 inches of planter between that and the sidewalk, right?
Yeah.
So on this side, I'm just trying to think, visualize this street, this side's got like 1 foot currently. So what you would have, I guess, until further development, a sidewalk that would go and then suddenly kick in 6 foot and then kind of come back like that. Is that correct?
So there is an opportunity. We typically would try to mirror what's across the street. Now, across the street has redeveloped before we created the downtown overlay and the streetscape requirements within the overlay. The south side of the street has not redeveloped yet, so we have an opportunity to meet. So we do understand that there may not be the same size planter across the street as there, or on this side of the street as they have across the street, but we do have to think about the pedestrian environment and making sure people will walk more if they feel protected from the road. So we do understand that we're not going to have exactly what we have on the other side of the street, but we feel like the pedestrian improving walkability in the downtown is the more important aspect there.
Thank you, Michael.
Yep.
So this impervious area, does that help with traffic too? Like the speed, Eric? Doesn't that help with the speed of traffic flow and?
It does, having that visual separation and the vertical elements such as the trees closer to the roadway helps, encourages vehicles to go a little bit slower.
Right, which was an objection of one of the residents, I think. Okay, thank you.
Michael, thinking about the lots to the east and the west that had concerns about if they were to redevelop, just want to get a better idea of what the buffer requirements would be if either one of those redevelops as commercial. On whom would it be incumbent to provide a buffer and how much of one?
Well, if this is approved with the condition 8 as written, those properties would be absolved from any buffer requirements. So there would be, the conditions state that the Wexlers would have to provide a 10-foot planting buffer along this property line, and this property line. If this property or this property were to redevelop in the future and redevelop with commercial uses, they would not be required to put the 50-foot buffer on their property. What they would be required to do is they would be required to provide, at a minimum, code requirement would be the 5-foot landscape strip along those property lines. Now, if they developed and they went through a rezoning process, it's likely that there'd be a condition recommending something greater than 5 feet. Typically, we look for a little bit more separation, typically about at least 10, which is what we're recommending on the Wexler's property. But they would not be required to provide the 50-foot buffer requirement on their property.
And we were comfortable that this will not create a problem for those adjoining property owners to redevelop their properties?
I don't think so. I mean, because the condition 8 is basically is what's protecting them. We've had this situation in the past, and we actually changed our code because of it. So in previous to, I want to say about 2017, the for sale property, the residential property, never had to provide the buffer on their property. It was only the commercial property or a property that's developed with a for-rent product. We had a few requests before that time where we had an office condo development that was never, they never finished construction, and they came in with a rezoning, and they rezoned the property to allow for a townhome community. This is off of North Main Street and Bond Drive. And so they were in the middle of a commercial environment, and they changed the zoning of that property to residential. And so you didn't want to put the requirement for the buffer on the adjacent commercial properties. So they had a similar type condition, basically absolving them from having to, the commercial properties from having to provide that 50-foot buffer as a result of the rezoning to residential.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any further questions?
I got one more. I'm sorry. I just thought of something. In here it said the home will be 3 stories. So in the rendering, it shows 2. So I just want to make sure, was there an idea that, I mean, I could go 3, but it looks like 2 on the rendering.
So I just recently got the elevation from the applicant. I'll let them respond to that. I think we were talking, before this was available, I think the applicant's intent was up to 3 stories. I don't know that they made a decision or not, but they'll probably be able to better answer that question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. We'll ask the applicant to come forward and make a presentation. Please state your name and address for the record.
Our current address or the one that we want to buy? We're under contract with the Suttons, so we don't officially own the 182.
Your current address.
But, okay. I'm Courtney Wexler. This is my husband, Andrew.
Andrew Wexler.
And we are currently under contract with the Suttons of 182 Marietta Street. And we actually live in Victoria Square, which is across Marietta Street. And just to give you a little background on us, we've lived in Alpharetta for 25 years and raised our children here. We have become empty nesters, and we sold our home and bought some property in Crabapple. We were planning to build a home there. And in the interim, we very luckily came across this property in Victoria Square, bought it, and we love it so much living where we do that we would like to build our home next to our neighbors across the street as opposed to moving to Crabapple. So that's where kind of how we got there.
Nice property.
So to answer your question, the 3 stories would include a basement, so that's why you don't see it in this elevation. It would be a basement.
Any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, if you don't mind. So usually it's kind of this interaction is kind of like what you tell us, what you envision in the property,
Okay.
what kind of home, what is it going to, I know we kind of have, and usually, just going to be honest, usually we have a lot more content to kind of take a look at in this process.
Okay.
We understand, like individuals, you're not a main developer, so I'm just kind of giving you an idea. So I think at this point, it's really good if you kind of tell us a little bit of the property, how you kind of talking to your engineers, your site, whoever you are. What do you see kind of happening on this? When do you see it happen? That's usually kind of the interaction we have right now.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, we obviously have hired Tim Bryan to do the architecture. We are still in the process. It's kind of difficult because they warn you not to get ahead of yourself when you don't own the property. However, y'all want to see a lot of information before you decide if you will be willing to rezone it. So we have gone ahead with our architecture, the architect to go ahead and do that. It is still in a working process. If y'all see things that y'all are like, we're not interested in seeing that on Marietta Street, we would love to know that information. We basically just want to build a home for us to live in. It's really not more complicated than that. We're not trying to secretly develop it and sell it and all that kind of jazz. We just want to build our home there. So we envision it as it's kind of similar to 12 on Canton and obviously what Virgil has already been approved for, and with a traditional type home with the porte-cochere with the garages in the back. We like to have a pool. It's very conducive for us because it's a very flat piece of property. So down the line, if it was an issue where someone was in a wheelchair or something, we could still move around the property easily, that type of thing. But we love what's happened to the city of Alpharetta, and we would really like to stay here. So,
Obviously, you're doing all the planning, and he's not.
he has worked very, very hard to put us in a position so that we have an opportunity to potentially build something like this to live in. We lived in Harrington Falls and sold our house, and I don't think we were expecting to love being so close to downtown and the walkability. I mean, I'm not trying to blow smoke, but y'all have done an amazing job in the planning process of the city of Alpharetta, and we love it, and we don't want to leave. We can. We have some property in Crabapple, but we'd rather stay here.
All credit goes to our staff. They do a great job.
They do.
All right. Do you have any concerns with any of the conditions from staff?
No, sir.
You're in.
We're in agreement, and we want to be good neighbors. I mean, we understand Valerie's comment and question about the adjacent properties. We don't want to put them in a position where they would potentially not be able to get everything that they want for their property and to build whatever they want. We want to protect ourselves. We will have plenty of very large evergreen trees to both buffer us and them. We want it to be a win-win for everyone, so.
Thank you. Any further questions?
I'm gonna go back to something just for a second.
Okay,
And
sure.
and I'll tell you why. It's in the report, and it says 3 stories. So just to kind of give you the reason why we're focused on that a little bit, is it does talk elevation. So when we talk 3 stories, is what's visible from your ground level. So if we have it in the report, and what we're looking at could be 2 different things. So you see where I'm tying into that. We're looking at a 2-story home here, and if that's what you're building,
Yes.
we just want to say 2-story in the report so it matches up to what you're saying.
Yes.
You kind of would understand what I was kind of doing. And I will kind of make a comment, and here's why. I've been in your shoes on the other side, and I've talked to just about every homeowner up and down Marietta Street. And there was a lot of discussion before of kind of combining some parcels and creating more density up and down the street. Spoke to a lot of Windsong and those kind of folks. And in that's what they didn't want to have, a lot of density. And I think there was an opportunity to even be like a brewery on the property and all these kind of things, ideas that had come up in the past. What I heard, just the voice of what I heard from the street, was they would like to see it more residential and kind of keep it quiet. The park, 122-acre park across the street, becomes a dynamic amenity resource for this, and that's kind of what you were seeing there. I'm going to ask another thing to you, because I had dinner with Penn Hodge last night. He said you guys were talking to him about that 20-foot piece that's between Old Milton and the back of your property. The reason why I'm asking, if you're pursuing that, what does it change? I might even ask staff, what dynamic does that change into, what you're looking at here? And it's just a discussion point. There's nothing really more than that.
It'd be buffer. It'd be additional buffer.
Okay.
That's the only, thought not knowing what setbacks and everything, we've been talking to them, if we needed extra land as buffer.
Good. Thank you.
And quite honestly, we'd rather not. It's a very, very expensive piece of property, and it's a very expensive home that we would like to build. I would love not to go through another process of rezoning it. We would love to keep it just the way it is. But
Thank you so much.
Thank you. You have some time. If anybody comes up and says anything, you can come and rebut or add whatever you'd like to add to what you just.
okay.
Thank you.
All right,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you all very much.
I'm going to open it for public comments. Anyone who would like to speak in favor of this application, please come forward. Seeing none, anyone in opposition to this application? No one. Anything else you'd like to add? All right. Thank you. I'm going to close public comment and turn this over to the board for a motion and/or discussion. I think following the presentation from both staff and the applicant, I'm persuaded that this is a good application to approve, and I think it triggers potential similar development to the east and maybe to the west of this property, which would be probably the most ideal type of development, unless somebody comes and assembles all these properties and comes up with an application for mixed-use development. So I would be in support of this application.
As your neighbor across the street, I love the fact, and first of all, I want to thank you guys for your investment. Really, what you're looking at is a significant investment, and we want to say thank you, especially in the downtown corridor. Anybody who comes, and I think Marietta Street's been a sleepy street, and it's great to kind of see some activity on the street. And I think the residential will really, I think it'll be a catalyst. You'll probably see it on 20, oh God, I forget my own address, 201 Marietta Street across the,
Yeah.
201 across the street, and seeing that, hopefully that will stir that a little bit. And I think it's great, and thank the Suttons too for, for their long-term, ownership in Alpharetta also. So I just want to say I'm in support of this also.
Most people who come here, they stay in Alpharetta. Alpharetta gives people reason to stay, and it's a beautiful product. Any further comments, motion, discussions?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve application Z-22-01-V-22-03 Wexler/182 Marietta Street, subject to the following conditions as set forth by staff.
I'd like to make a friendly amendment that we do talk about the two-story element in there. I know it's in the report, and just want to note that the report does say it on the site plan. If you'd accept that friendly amendment.
Please do.
Second.
Motion has been made and properly seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion carries unanimously. The recommendation is to council to approve, and it's going to be on Monday, March the 28th. Thank you. Then the next, thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. The next item on the agenda is PH-22-01/Unified Development Code Text Amendments. Ms. Kathy Cook will be presenting.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, Chairman and Commissioners. There's a couple of different Unified Development Code text amendments that I'm going to be presenting, and I'm going to start out with the definitions that we're looking at adding and changing within the code. And they're a little bit all over the place, the different text amendments, but it does make it a little easier to put it into one item. So looking at the definitions, we're looking at breaking up the athletic facility. So right now, it was combined with the fitness studio. So we think that it makes better sense to break those up because the uses are just, can be very different. If you think about an athletic facility, a Lifetime Fitness is a large facility compared to if you were just going to a bar studio, yoga studio, so they're very different. So the proposal is to break those up into two definitions. So the athletic facility is shown there, and it's just a description. And also within an athletic facility, you will have personal training. You also have massage and stretch therapy. Because what we found is a lot of the larger athletic facilities like Lifetime, they actually do have massage within those larger facilities, but it's not something that you would have within a smaller yoga studio per se. So that's the athletic facility. And then the definition of a fitness studio, and again, just breaking that up so that the uses are identified differently. And then we're also adding laboratory research or commercial definition. And we've always had that listed, but we didn't have an actual definition within the code. So this is looking at adding an actual definition. And it's a facility that provides controlled conditions in which scientific or technological research, experiments, and measurements may be performed. At the federal level, 4 levels of laboratory biosafety have been created. The levels denote the type of actions, administrative procedures, training, or physical controls, protective gear, and filtration that should be used to contain the agents being worked with. Containment means protection of the lab workers, those in the building, and the greater environment. Containment level limited to biosafety levels 1, 2, and 3. And then previously within your packet, we had actually spelled out what level 1, 2, 3, and 4 is, but those can change over time with the definitions, so we just put the level 1, 2, and 3. Again, this was already within our code, but there was no definition. So what this does is provide that definition. And then we also have research and development. And research and development is something that's been allowed within several master plans, and that's located mostly within the Windward Master Plan. There's also a few other master plans that allow research and development, but what we have found, especially within economic development, is there's just an increase in life science uses. So we wanted to make sure that research and development was something that's allowed within our existing office and provide a definition of what that looks like. You know that you've seen, or you may be familiar with PIUNC, which is a medical building that's a medical manufacturing building that's over in Windward. So what they manufacture is needles, specialty needles that are for pain management, and that's what they use instead of actual medication. What we found when we were touring some of these facilities and also the Siemens manufacturing facilities, that about 50% of these facilities have the actual office. So you'll have some of that office space. It could be corporate office space, engineering office space, and then they'll have like a 50% of laboratory and light manufacturing that's attached to that. So that's the definition that we're looking to add to the Unified Development Code. And it says, research and development, a use that includes activities that businesses undertake to innovate and introduce new products and services such as biomedical, software and technology development and manufacturing, technically oriented services and training facilities, engineering and consulting, scientific laboratories and clean rooms, office and corporate headquarters. So many years ago, they used to separate these uses. And what we've seen over time is you would have your distribution center in one area, then you would have your office. Now they have those combined because they want those creative workers together, working together. So that is why we are proposing this definition, because it keeps up with current office development. As a part of that, you'll see through the code, we also had to add the research and development to where we have office buildings listed and office parks to make sure that it was clear throughout that document that research and development would be permitted within the different zoning categories. So we added that to the CUP, which is typical 100 acres, large master plan. That's the Windward Master Plan is actually CUP and already permits the research and development. And then just throughout the document, we've added where an athletic facility, since we broke those definitions up, we had to make sure that we went through the document and added where those should be, under which zoning designations they should be located. We also have a table that's included within your packet. We're required to go through the list and list them in the text part of the document, but we're also required to put that in the table, so the table will match what you saw in the text. We also have the downtown code that we had to take out the combined definition of athletic facility, fitness studio. So very similar exercise, it's just through the downtown zoning designations versus the outside of the downtown. And then we have some totally different supplementary regulations, and these are because of different questions that will come up. Sometimes it's with best management practices for traffic management, but when we explain to people how they can't have a curb cut within a certain distance, there's questions about that. The other issue that we've had over the last couple of years is we've been able to make sure that when people come in and ask for those curb cuts, that we can manage that. If you're one residential lot next to a residential lot, you can have a curb cut within 300 feet. However, you cannot have two curb cuts on your property if it's within 300 feet. So those code changes are in order to make that clear. So you can see here under 2.5.6B, we added that clarification. And we also added the last sentence, a curb cut on a residential lot may be closer than 300 feet from a curb cut on an adjacent lot, but an individual residential lot shall not have more than one curb cut per 300 feet of street frontage. And that's just to clarify that you can have one per lot, but you just can't have two on your individual lot. We also have a clarification for prohibited parking. And this is another item where you see how development has changed, and you may have smaller lots that are at the corners where we have had where people are parking at the rear, and it's still something that's very visible from the public street. So we're clarifying number 3, park a vehicle, that it's prohibited to park a vehicle on an unpaved surface in any commercial district, the front yard of a residential or the side or rear yard, if the side or rear yard fronts on the street, except as provided for in a subsection 2.5.5E. So more clarification. And I believe I touched on all the different changes. Oh, no, I missed one on the front of that. This is also a clarification. We're on under 2.3.1C. We added 3. Double frontage lots shall obtain access from the street from the lower functional classification unless this poses a safety hazard or would otherwise be impractical. So this has always been a practice from the traffic engineer, but we've had questions about is that something that's within your code, and if it's not, then there's some issue with some pushback. But of course, you always want to have that access if it's possible from the lower functional classification. And that is all the changes. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer those.
Thank you for your presentation. Any questions for Ms. Cook?
Kathy, quick question about a lot having 2 curb cuts. If a lot happens to be on a corner, meaning it has street facing on 2 sides of the property, are they still constrained, or can they have a curb cut on each street side?
They probably, Eric would have to look at that, because typically no, because you want to keep the distance from 300 to be more than 300 feet. So if you're already providing one access, you don't want to set up another curb cut when they do have an access.
Okay, and I had one other question about the prohibited parking on unpaved surface in the side or rear. Did I hear you say that it's only if it's visible from the street?
Let me put that back up here.
I don't see the words, so I just wanted to make sure.
Oh, sorry. Yes, it's prohibited to park a vehicle on an unpaved surface in any commercial district the front yard of a residence or side or rear yard if the side or rear yard fronts on the street. So you can have a rear yard that is actually fronting the street.
Understood. So it's not prohibitive if the rear yard is not maybe visible from a street, but it's
Right.
not fronting that street.
That's correct, but you still are supposed to be on a paved surface, so you would have had to have gotten approval to have some type of a parking behind the house, but you're not going to be able to if it's something that's fronting that street.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Kathy, I was just wondering, except for the restricted parking, any of these other conditions like the research and development, how does that affect any property owners that are currently out there, maybe in the middle of the process? This doesn't change their requirements as somewhat, they still have time to adjust, I guess, to any of these changes?
Yeah, it actually gives them more uses, more rights than what they currently have. So if you have a master plan, a large office park that has listed office as the only permitted use, now you would be able to have research and development by right. Now you still have management of the office park that may have not permit that, but what this would allow you to do is have research and development, and up to 50% of that space could be used for laboratory light manufacturing. So you would actually gain with these changes.
It's kind of where I was going. I just want to make sure they're very positive changes for
Yes.
any owner of property out there. And that does get adopted immediately, then it's not as soon as it gets approved by city council, it goes immediately to that property.
That's correct. And again, it's because we've seen that change in the configuration of office and the rise in life science uses. So we're trying to keep up with that trend.
Because I was trying to think through any negative impact, right? 'Cause I mean, that's what we're kind of concerned about.
Yeah,
I couldn't think of any.
We don't see any negative impact because this is for property that's already zoned office, or it could have an existing office building. So it's already within a commercial district.
Great, thank you.
I don't have a question, I just have a comment in that I just wanted to give kudos to you and your staff. I was on the Planning Commission for 7 years and now stepping back on and going back through and looking at all the definitions and how well they're done and how well you've updated them and maintained them. You've done a really
Thank you.
good job.
Thank you.
All right, any other nice comments?
Yes, only nice ones, please. Yeah.
All right, anyone in the audience would like to say anything about this application, not application, but these changes? No one. I'll turn this over now to the board for consideration, but the first comment I'd like to make is when I read these definitions and changes, it was just refreshing to see the clarity and the importance of doing this. And I wanted to make a comment, especially on the research and development. There's several incentives from the federal government, tax incentives for research and development. And companies are actually going back and determining whether what they do constitutes research and development. And this is something we'd like to advance in Alpharetta, and I think this basically helps those who are interested in probably already doing research and development be able to justify some potential tax benefits. And they are very, very significant when you do research and development. And all the other changes are just perfect the way they are written. I went through them one at a time. So I am in full support.
Totally agree with that. I make a motion to approve PH-22-01, Unified Development Code text amendments, research and development, laboratory, and athletic facility, and fitness studio and driveways.
Second.
Motion has been made, properly seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your right hand. Approved unanimously. And Ms. Cook knows what to do with it from
Yes.
here.
Thank you.
Anything else the board would like to discuss?
We have an easy night tonight? It's less than an hour? Is this a record for us? 50 minutes is really a record. Sorry, wanted to get on record about that.
And it's not just, sometimes we cover things very quickly, but what we just did, especially on the text amendments, is very significant to the city of Alpharetta.
Yes.
So it's not the amount of time we spend, it's actually what we do. So